LA has had a wild season thanks to the Luka Doncic trade, and though their momentum has slowed to close the year, the three-headed snake of Luka, LeBron, and Austin have looked like world beaters. Minnesota has had a down year after making it to the Western Conference Finals just last season, and after trading Cat for Randall. With that deal looking questionable at first, it seemed like they were out of contention, but in the last 21 games Randall has played since returning from injury. Minnesota is 17-4. The odds look stacked against the Timberwolves, but I think they have a real shot of surprising a lot of people. So, the Minnesota Timberwolves and the LA Lakers are squaring off in round one. Who will win? Let's talk about it. Hello everybody, welcome to Rusty Bucket. Subscribe to the channel and drop a like. Also, real quick, I want to give a shout out to a fellow YouTuber, NBA YouTuber traveler, I guess. Big fan of Emio from NBA Storyteller. He's been a huge inspiration over the years, and recently his documentary about Leroy Smith and some of the lies around Michael Jordan's legend from high school. He recently put that out and it got nominated for a Webby, and he's up against a bunch of major companies, and it's a fan vote, so that will be the top link in the description, top link in the replies. Please go check that out, give him a vote, it'd mean a lot. I'm also going to be on a live stream with him on the 15th, which is tomorrow, about that, so yeah, look forward to that. Now, before we get into this matchup, I do want to do a brief history lesson here. The Timberwolves and Lakers have matched up in the playoffs 2 times since the Wolves expansion team came in 1989. Both times it was Kevin Garnett's Wolves versus Kobe and Shaq back to back. LA beat Minnesota 4-2 in round 1. Kobe and Shaq averaged 60, 20, and 10 combined, while KG put up 27, 16, 5, 1.7 steals, and 1.7 blocks, while Troy Hudson averaged 23 points per game, shooting 44% on 6.5 three-point attempts a game. Minnesota put up a hell of a fight, even taking a 2-1 lead, but KG just could not overcome the superstar duo. In 2004, they got much closer, this time in the Western Conference Finals. Again, it was a 6-game series, but Game 6 was much closer, and Minnie did not lose 3 straight this time. KG again put up insane numbers, though a little bit more tame than last time, while Latrell Sprewell stepped up into the second option role pretty well. Kobe and Shaq's numbers were actually down, but the depth of Yuck, Malone, and Gary Payton and Derek Fisher got them through. Both times, Minnesota was the underdog, a defensive-minded team led by an insanely talented young player that had a lot cut out for him on offense, and wouldn't you know it, they're in that exact same position in 2025. The game I scouted for this video was the February 27th matchup between these two teams, a game that the Lakers won 111-102. Unfortunately, there is no Randall or Gobert in this game. Instead, they went with Naz Reid and Terrence Shannon Jr. I had to pick this game because it was the only one where Luka's Lakers faced Minnesota, and there's not much to get out of what the Lakers with AD would look like versus this team. Not ideal, but gotta work with what I have here. What this series will primarily come down to is how Ant handles being the lead creator, because he's alone while the Lakers have a whole lot of options there. On top of that, what also matters is how well his teammates are capable of capitalizing on the advantages that he does create. Ant has improved a ton at dealing with double teams throughout the year. He complained about it earlier on, but he's definitely got much more of a feel for it. Here, he throws a very impressive cross-court pass to Terrence Shannon Jr. for a wide-open corner 3. That was a fairly easy read to make, but it's not the easiest pass in the world, so it's a good one there. At the same time, when it's not just as simple as catching and shooting, you get shit like this, where his teammates do not know what to do. On the drive, Ant creates an advantage, but Nickeil Alexander-Walker is not capable of capitalizing. He passes up on the open 3, and then he tries to dish it down to Jaden McDaniels under the basket, who does not have the hands to catch the pass. Ant isn't a great lead decision maker, and Minnesota's play finishing leaves a lot of room to be desired. Contrast this to LA's playmaking ability between their three-headed snake, and it's a night and day difference. Right here, Luka throws a full court pass to LeBron, who cuts off the defenders. Wow. Minnesota can't do shit like that. huge playmaking advantage here. Right here, Luka throws a cross-court pass out of the double team to a wide-open Jared Vanderbilt. That is a crazy read. Those were just Luka clips, but LeBron and Reeves are also very, very, very phenomenal passers. You don't need me to tell you that about LeBron, but Reeves has a very strong acumen for it too. Between the three of them, they have averaged 19.3 assists per game since Luka's been there. That's only 7 less assists in total than what Minnesota averages as a team. So playmaking wise, there's a huge advantage in LA's favor, but then we get to shooting wise, where I do feel like the advantage is LA's, even though the difference in the numbers isn't too crazy. Since the deadline, LA shoots the 8th most three-pointers in the league and the 5th best percentage on those threes. So very high volume and, well, pretty good volume and very high on the percentage. Meanwhile, Minnesota shoots the 5th most threes, also a high volume shooting team. However, they're just 13th in terms of percentage, which is not bad, but not very good. But personnel-wise, just in terms of the options they have to shoot the ball, I am confident that LA shooters are just way better, and substantially better than Minnesota's. Besides for Ant, Conley, and DiVincenzo, there isn't any more than like an average shooter in the rotation. Naz Reid and Nickeil Alexander-Walker have their moments, but they're certainly not what I would call knockdown shooters. But the best way to mitigate shooting when you're facing a team that has a lot of it is just putting your worst defender on the guys who are not very good at shooting and leaving them wide open. But against LA, that just doesn't really work because they're also just masters at mismatch hunting with the personnel to execute it perfectly. Right here, Rob Dillingham has the Vando matchup out of the corner, but LeBron gets the screen from Vando and just brushes him off like he's not even there on his way to the rim. LeBron and Luka can do this at any time against smaller players, but they're also going to burn a lot of the bigger players in that position. Meanwhile, with Minnesota, when they had a big man on a wing, which is a different kind of mismatch, but a mismatch nonetheless, they did nothing to take advantage of it. Right here, Hayes is on McDaniels, and he did basically nothing to make them pay for it as a much quicker player with decent handle and some scoring acumen. He finished 6 for 18. With a bunch of ugly mid-range pull-ups, he could not get to the basket against the slower-footed big. No punishment for that mismatch. LA is probably the better shooting team, and they're also much better at dealing with a lack of shooting out of some of their players. Minnesota is not very good at dealing with the lack of shooting that is pretty prevalent. Then if you just look at this from a pure scoring perspective, just all buckets, well, Ant can be denied a lot by double teams. You cannot stop Ant. He's too good at this point in his career to be like, oh, we're going to shut him out. But you can absolutely contain him, and after he's contained, Minnesota does not have a whole lot to fall back on. Dorian Finney-Smith was the primary Ant matchup in this one, and he did a really, really good job of denying the ball, with there also being a couple of Rui and Vando possessions as well, and a shitload of double teams being thrown his way. Ant only got up 12 field goal attempts in 26 minutes of action. Julius Randle is a notorious playoff choker, but even if he plays exactly as good as he has in his last 21 games of the regular season in the playoffs, that's still just an 18-point per game scorer as your second option. Dante DiVincenzo and sometimes Jaden McDaniels seemingly should be able to step up scoring the ball, but that's still very short of the options that LA has. And it's not like the Lakers are giving up some major advantage on defense because of their offensive talent. Sure, their defensive scheme of the season might get tested a little bit differently with some of their best players, but at the end of the day, I mean, they're arguably better at playing small anyways, and LeBron and Luka have been playing their best defense in a minute. Multiple possessions in this one where they were great. LeBron did a great job on Naz Reid, and Luka had like 2 different possessions where Ant tried to ISO on him and he just had to throw the ball away because there was no advantage to be created. Now on this play here, it does result in a BS foul that LA can absolutely live with, but look at their ability to recover after they double Ant. No shot for Anthony Edwards, gets completely denied of any kind of look, and then no advantage that would have come of it if they didn't call a stupid foul, and they're not going to call that shit in the playoffs. I expect LA to run small a shit ton ton because, let's be real, Jackson Hayes has a lot of limited utility. He can catch alley-oops and block some shots here or there. He's not a terrible rebounder, but he has very limited mobility on the defensive end and a very, very little touch on offense. Virtually no touch. Right here on defense, Hayes is not able to step up on Mike Conley off of this screen, and it just leaves him completely wide open on a pull-up three-pointer. And then on this possession on offense, he misses a very basic layup out of the pick and roll because he damn near throws it at the rim without any kind of touch at all. And then he immediately gets subbed for Vando right after this play. With Rudy Gobert in the series, I don't think that he'll do too much to make them pay for running small. Maybe a few offensive boards here or there, maybe a layup or two you wouldn't have given up otherwise, but nothing resembling dominant paint scoring or anything like that. In this particular game, LeBron actually got the Nas Reed matchup, and he did exceptionally well. He held him to just 1 of 10 shooting, with the only make being a putback layup when LeBron wasn't on him. Do you not think that he could do a well enough job on Rudy Gobert, who has literally no offensive skill, far less than Nas Reed? Even Rui can do a pretty damn good job on Gobert because I imagine LeBron would get a lot of Julius Randle matchup minutes. Either way, there is little in the way of advantages on offense for Minnesota. They have access to such few actually good options. So if they're going to win this series, they're going to have to win it on the defensive side of the ball. Since the deadline, Minnesota is the 9th best defense in the league with a defensive rating of 113.4, while LA is 17th with a 115.9 defensive rating. That's not an insignificant difference, but we're not talking about like a canyon-sized gap here. They're pretty close, all things considered, especially looking at the difference on offense. McDaniels got the LeBron matchup while they threw Terrence Shannon Jr. at Luka Doncic. I don't think that he's going to be a big rotation guy in the playoffs, so it's not a huge deal, but shout out to him. Terrence had a really good game in this one in his first ever start in the NBA, but I do imagine that Luka will primarily be getting the Nickeil Alexander-Walker, Dante DiVincenzo, and Anthony Edwards matchups. Probably not a whole lot of Ant because that is determined a good amount by how much they want to exhaust Anthony's energy on that end of the floor. Nickeil Alexander-Walker especially, and even Dante DiVincenzo a little bit, are some pretty good matchups. And I also expect the occasional Jaden McDaniels whenever LeBron is not on the floor. No reason not to throw McDaniels at him. He's also going to see a ton of doubles, as you would expect, especially in the playoffs with non-shooters on the floor, but Luka is perfect at that. Now, LeBron shot crazy from 3 in this game despite a lot of good defense from McDaniels. I think Minnesota feels good about that matchup as a whole. It was more like LeBron was just hot in this one. And Luka was bad in this game, but this was at the stretch of the season where he was just bad every other game at this point in the year. But they got a lot of good options for him, and as long as 2 of Nickeil Alexander-Walker, DiVincenzo, and Ant are on the floor, then that means they're also going to have a pretty good matchup for Austin Reeves, which is obviously the big selling point of this Lakers team, is not having a good matchup for any of those 3 options. Minnesota does, for the most part. It's not as good as it could be, but they're doing pretty fucking good. Now, the big question for this defense, easily the biggest question for this defense, is how will Gobert fare against the space and quickness of LA's small ball? Matched up against Jackson Hayes, he's not going to have to worry about too much other than the occasional switch, and not somebody that he has to be super scared of around the rim unless it's literally just a dunk. So he'll be fine in those minutes, I'm sure. But when they go small, he is going to get in a lot of space. I imagine he gets put on Jared Vanderbilt or Jordan Goodwin. LA can still target him on the perimeter with those matchups. He's not going to be able to just camp around the basket. And I'm sure he will get burned quite a few times because he's not getting any younger. Remember that play with Rob Dillingham on Vando? Well, just imagine it's Rudy instead. Yeah, he's bigger, but he's much slower than Dillingham, and he's just going to get left behind and the rim's going to be wide open. That said, because his rim protection is as good as it is, and Minnesota can do a good enough job avoiding the mismatch hunting, he will still be more of a positive than a negative on the defensive end, but considering his offensive negatives, he might not be someone that you can actually play 35 minutes a game. Now, guys like Julius Randle and Nas Reed need to be big and be in the right spots, and they're mostly fine enough at that, but they're also guys who can be targeted on a switch as well. I do think the Wolves can do a good job defending LA, but the issue is LA can do more or less the same versus Minnesota. Minnie's offense is just too limited by contrast to the Lakers, who have a ton of options, and the Wolves can't make up for it by being an overwhelmingly better defense. They are for sure the better defense, absolutely, no question, but it's not by as much of a difference as they'd need it to be to make up for the gap on offense. Not to mention, of course, that the NBA's bias will be working against them to some degree or another. I think LA getting easy whistles and that just being the reason they win all the time is super overblown. And in this February 27th game, LA shot 20 more free throws, but they also just drove significantly more. But the call favorability definitely leaned their way, and then on top of that, they increased the odds of getting a call by just being a way more prolific slashing team. So the free throw numbers will all but certainly be in LA's favor. The shooting will be in their favor, at least to some degree. The playmaking will be massively in their favor. The play finishing is going to be in their favor. The one-on-one and depth of scoring is also going to be massively in their favor. But even though I picked Minnesota as my dark horse, pretty hard to pick against the Lakers here. They have better defense. They have more size overall. Is that it? So my final prediction, I'm probably going to say Lakers in 6. Ironically, similar to the 2 times they've matched up in the past. I just think it's going to be too much determined by Ant carrying on the offensive end of the floor. Not that it has to be some crazy carry job, but even if there's a hint of that, even if there's a hint of Anthony Edwards just backpacking this team, you're not going to backpack your way through this Lakers roster, because nobody on the other end, when you're going up against their offense, is going to be backpacking. It's going to be free-flowing, going to be consistently generating clean looks, and as hard as you may try on defense, you won't make up for the fact that you're regularly not getting clean looks on the other end. So Ant will probably be fine, but I can't really bet on Rudy Gobert and Julius Randle. I really have my doubts about the perimeter options other than Dante DiVincenzo. I haven't even highlighted how much you can target Mike Conley, so that limits how much you can play him, even though he's one of your 3 best shooters. So I gotta go LA here, but Minnesota has a chance, and that was the thing. We're titling this video, "Can the Timberwolves upset the Lakers?" Is that what's possible here? And, you know, whether or not it's even an upset was up for debate. I made a Twitter poll about it. More people said either yes, it's an upset, or kind of it's an upset. It's only a difference of like a game or 2, but the Lakers just have more talent, and they're the Lakers. So they definitely have the favorability rather significantly. But if Minnesota won this series, would be far from the biggest shock to my system that is possible in this year's playoffs. So yeah, I'm picking the Lakers, but Timberwolves fans, I don't think you have no shot. Don't believe that. But yeah, that is it. Shout out to Rudy for editing this video, and goodbye.